Now we will continue with Ioannis Karachristos here. He completed the PhD in modern Greek history in Vienna University. In Greek and Austrian universities, studied European history, Greek history, and as of 2009 attends Hellenic Research Center, acts as a researcher. In today's paper, as part of these activities, the presentation will be about these issues, and also there is a silent Smyrna, stories from a stillborn city. This is a book they work with another person, and in today's paper the title will be In Search of Gender Identities in the Popular Culture of the Greek Community of Izmir and its Hinterland. This is not a very much spoken about issue.
I would like to begin by expressing my sincere thanks to the Hrant Dink Foundation and the organizing committee for giving me the opportunity to be here today and to share my work with you. So, the integration of Western Anatolia into the global economy, in parallel to Izmir's development as a harbor city, led to the city's economic and demographic expansion, especially after the 1850s, thus drawing people not only from all over the Ottoman Empire, but also beyond its borders. Izmir became a metropolis of the Eastern Mediterranean, both in the city's Greek press before 1922 and in the mnemonic representations of Smyrniot refugees resettled in Greece after 1922, the images of urban cosmopolitan Smyrna and its bourgeois culture dominate. Only recently researchers began to question this unified image by exploring the lower social strata and their culture. However, gender is not a parameter of the studies on Izmir's popular culture, except for some individual references. So in this paper, through a thorough investigation of cultural practices, as well as of oral tradition, we are addressing the following issues. First, the action spaces of men and women, both public and private. And second, the formation of beliefs concerning gender roles and identities in the context of the popular culture of Izmir and its hinterland. To this aim, we will analyze mainly interviews with Smyrniot refugees, which are kept in the archives of the Hellenic Folklore Research Center of the Academy of Athens, and the Center for Asia Minor Studies, also in Athens, as well as other sources, mainly published ones. Without the slightest intention to reduce the value of these sources, anyway I'm using them, we must take their peculiarities into account. The information they provide was mediated through the memory of the informants, who recalled information about their past and gave them the form of narrative in order to respond to the prompting of the material collectors. We should also bear in mind that these narrations relate to their lives in their places of origin, their lost homelands, as they typically called them, and therefore we should not exclude a tendency to idealize life there, as anthropological studies on similar cases have shown. Nevertheless, idealizing the past can obviously help people escape from an, according to their perceptions, problematic present. or, to express it in historical terms, once the mnemonic community, the milieu de mémoire, must be necessarily reconstituted away from its place of origin, this place is most likely invested with specific memories and turned into a symbol, a lieu de mémoire, as Pierre Nora, who first coined these terms, has shown. Storytelling concerning life in the homelands strengthened family and community bonds and helped to create a strong local identity for people originating from the same place. So, reminiscences, together with elements of their oral tradition, formed the refugees' communicative memory, to use the word that was introduced by Jan and Aleida Assmann. Bearing these peculiarities in mind, we chose to combine beliefs with practices in order to fully and deeply comprehend the former by setting them in context. Finally, we chose to look into the communicative framework of reminiscences and oral tradition by restoring the connection between them and the informant's life stories, a connection that is not obvious at first glance due to the methods of collecting and archiving the oral interviews. The picture that emerges regarding the action spaces of men and women is as follows. Professional activity outside the house was male-dominated, men being employed as shopkeepers and craftsmen, either in the city of Smyrna or in the settlements around it, farmers, farm workers, and stock breeders, both in the satellite settlements and in the remote districts of Izmir itself, workers and porters, both in the railway station and in the port of Izmir. It is worth noting that many farmers and stock breeders transported themselves daily agricultural and livestock products and sold them directly to buyers in the states of Izmir. Particular reference should be made to the storing and packaging of tobacco, raisins, and figs, a work that occupied both men and women from the lower social strata of both Izmir and its hinterland, as well as seasonal immigrants coming from the Aegean islands. In addition, women were employed as maids, wet nurses, also in agricultural work, and as embroidery and dressmakers, a job which, as a recent study has shown, was often undertaken at home on contract basis. Undoubtedly, the women of Izmir's lower strata have entered the field of paid employment, having to work outside their home. However, this activity was largely within the home area of their employers. I refer here to the maids and the wet nurses, which was one of the most common jobs they did, and less in places where they came directly into contact with their male colleagues. It should also be noted that they were principally engaged in professions associated with alleged female tasks such as home and childcare, as well as in professions with low requirements for professional qualifications. Trust was a necessary factor in conducting trade and lending money, two extremely important sectors of Izmir's economy, at least since the 18th century. Thus, being worthy of trust was an important value for Smyrniot men, a value that was even reflected in popular culture through proverbs such as the following: from a bad debtor, take a handful of straw, or grab the bald and take his hair, because he doesn't have any, as the informant noted. Interestingly enough, there are no such proverbs concerning women. This lack shows that work outside the house was still considered a deviation from the ideal life course of a woman. of a woman. Perhaps one of the most projected values attributed to women was being a good housewife, a complex task that required cooking, cleaning, raising children, ensuring the health of family members through incantations and also through certain customs, caring for the deceased, etc. The Greek word for housewife, nikokira, is very indicative since it literally means mistress of the house. Speaking again through Proverbs, the Smyrnians were instructing women on their duties by stigmatizing the bad housewife. Lazy women cook only soups and food boiled in water, or only every Saturday evening is our daughter-in-law hardworking. A proverb that also reflects the uneven power relations within the household. The subordination of women to men can also be traced in the belief that widows are in need for help in order to come in terms with managing all the family affairs after the loss of their husband. This belief is found in legends recorded both in the city of Izmir and in Karşıyaka. The male grammatical form nikokiris existed as well and designated the man who was in a position to run the household and to provide for his family through his work. Marriage was considered to be the main objective in a woman's life, which is evidenced by the great importance attributed to by young girls to the collection of the dowry, as well as by customs such as klidhonas, which were aimed at divination of the future husband. Ideally, marriages were arranged through matchmaking, with the girl's personal qualities, her family's reputation, and her dowry playing a crucial role. But there was always some room for courtship, both during the custom of klidhonas, where young men from the neighborhood were standing by, eager to see the outcome of divination concerning their beloved ones, and also during community festival. As a woman recounts, quote, girls were sitting separately from the lads. Every young man who had in his mind one of the girls wanted to find a way to express his love for her. The lads were usually holding handsome silk scarves in their hands, so they went in front of their beloved and threw the scarf at her feet. If the girl bent and picked up the scarf, she was obliged to dance with this young man. Somehow they were considered to be half engaged, so they took great care in throwing the scarf in order to avoid either a girl who was inferior or one who was above their reach. The girls felt proud, and the lads were obliged in a short time to officially ask the girls for marriage. End of quote. Probably because otherwise the honor of the young woman, another extremely important value, would be offended. This practice is likely to be of Western origin, since the gesture of throwing handkerchiefs is interpreted as erotic invitation of women to their beloved ones in courtly and romantic love since the Middle Ages. In any case, we are witnessing an interesting transformation of new practices and values and a combination with traditional ones. In the following passage, the informant goes even further by stating that, quote, matchmaking in my hometown, Smyrna, was not for the dowry. A young man, when he appreciated a girl, he married her without caring for the dowry, provided, of course, that she came from a respectable household. End of quote. If that was indeed the case, it was an important breach that left room for questioning the established system of beliefs and values. We continue with the study of territoriality within the church during religious ceremonies. In Kukluja's church, the basic distinction was made according to gender, with a clear superiority of men in terms of their place in the church. Then there was an inner separation of men, according to their ages. Quote, the women's apartment was two-story, with a wooden partition on the ground floor. no woman entered the main part of the church. In the main church, in front of the narthex, there was a glass partition. Inside there was a table where the commissioners of the church sat. The older and most venerable persons stood at the bottom of the church, which was nearer to the women's apartment. On the right side of the church, facing the sanctuary, stood the younger persons, not the very young and the children. They stood on the left side. End of quote. In Bucharest church, the most interesting factor was not so much the segregation between men and women, but the inner segregation of women according to their age and their social roles. Quote, the men stood on the right, the women on the left side of the church. In the upper floor of the church, there was the women's apartment for girls and newly wed women. End of quote. The next example helps us to understand the meaning of this internal segregation between women even better. The inner space of the church in Sevdikoi was organized in almost the same way as it was in Bucha. When the Greek army occupied the place, the alla turca, according to the informant, wooden partition that separated the women's apartment was removed. That aroused negative comments from the side of men who stated that, quote, now young women are like actresses, end of quote. Being visible to everyone presumably endangered the honor of the unmarried young women. The implication of an alleged low moral status of actresses constitutes an indirect critique to changes caused by modernity. In the next case, distinction is created through the management of time. Name feasts were often celebrated with the participation of men, while women visited these homes on the following Sundays. So, women were indeed, quote-unquote, not hiding in their homes, as this informant rushed to point out, but the duty of symbolic representation of the family was undoubtedly performed by the men's visit on the day of the feast, while the visit of women at a later date worked purely complementarily. The above-mentioned distinctions not only expressed a system of beliefs concerning gender roles, but also contributed to the justification and reproduction of power relations that arose from the existing gender hierarchy. In conclusion, we would say that beliefs, customs, and practices functioned as a mechanism of informal learning on gender roles, a mechanism that needs to be socially and culturally acceptable in order to function seamlessly. We should therefore look more closely at possible discourse variations of our informants depending on their gender. However, the fact that many of the aforementioned information were transmitted by women shows that the acceptance of the established order system of social relations was wide and exceeded the boundaries of gender. However, deviations have also been observed between practice on the one hand and the established systems of beliefs and customs on the other. The constantly fluid conditions that existed in a port city like Izmir, with a predominantly migrant population, created the necessary preconditions for challenging the established system of beliefs that was shaped by the coexistence of different immigrant groups with the local population, all that within the Greek community of Izmir. A comparative approach to questions examined in this study, and I hope such an approach could emerge out of conferences like this one, an approach that would take into account the other ethnocultural groups of Izmir, Turks, Armenian, Jews, and Levantines, still remains to be done. This approach would allow the exploration of possible cultural transfers, some of which have already emerged from this communication, as well as the examination of the applicability of the common world theory to study the culture of Izmir's popular strata. Thank you very much for your attention.